Biological psychology. This is one where people sometimes assume that there's really not much need at least, for studying culture. But in fact, there's a whole burgeoning area of research on gene-cultural interaction, uh, understanding individual differences in genetic and physiological processes. Does culture affect brain activity? One of the really interesting ones is whether ethnocentrism can be a product of evolution. For example, there's studies showing that women in the first trimester of pregnancy may be more ethnocentric than other women, probably because the fetus the embryo is very vulnerable, and if you avoid outside groups, you're more likely to avoid illness, other influences that could harm the fetus. And is there cross-cultural evidence for natural selection in humans? For example, there have been studies of groups who live at high altitude around the world in places like Tibet and the Andes of South America, and in places where those cultures have lived in the mountains at high altitude for a longer time, for more centuries, for example, there are differences in blood pressure and tolerance for the altitude, probably based upon the length of time the culture has been present at high altitude. And so there's a kind of a developing area of interest in this interplay between natural selection and cultural backdrop.